Hello, everyone. So welcome tonight. We're getting on just a hair late. We were having some, in the technical world, we've got IT issues that pop up all the time. Unfortunately, Mike's camera is not working, so we'll get a picture of us so you can envision what he looks like as he's talking when we go through the introduction. But for now, you'll just have to use your imagination. And he did label himself Keith Richards, just kind of to show you his personality and the fun that we're going to have with him tonight. So
actually, do you have the Brad Pitt picture that I sent in? I mean my true picture that I sent in. You have that one?
The one that your Brad Pitt's doppelganger.
That's right. Yes. Absolutely. Yep. Actually, it's a curse, but we'll talk about that later.
Well, we'll give everybody just another minute or two to join us, and then we'll get going in. And actually, we've got a bunch of housekeeping, so maybe we'll do the housekeeping while everybody's joining, and we'll just get started on some of these introductions. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. My name's Tiffany Dobbs, and I am the community health manager here at St. Luke's McCall. And we're so excited with the interest and that people have shown in our series for May for our Mental Health Awareness Month. So Dawn, would you mind hitting next for us? So a couple of little housekeeping things that we can knock out of the way while we're waiting for everybody to join. Just our typical disclaimers that, this video shouldn't be construed as medical advice. So if you do need some medical advice, please reach out to your healthcare provider. Mike's going to give us a lot of advice tonight, but we'll throw that little disclaimer out there. And then this video is for our personal use. It's for our personal growth for this evening, so so not to be used in any commercial way. The contents, the video, the graphics, all the stuff that goes into this evening is property of St. Luke's. We do get to record it, Mike. We know that there's never a great time that's going to be perfect for everyone to attend, and so he graciously said yes, that we get to record this evening, so people can either go back and watch it again, or if you weren't able to join us live, that people can watch it. So we will share that link. Probably it takes a couple of days to get it ready, so we'll share that out next week, and you are welcome to share that with others as well. And then the great thing about this month, our St. Luke's McCall Foundation was able to write for a grant through our Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. So I'm not sure who all has been taking part. We've been able to do something weekly this whole month of May, and all of that is courtesy of that grant from Idaho Department of Health Welfare, from CDC, and from that St. Luke's McCall Foundation. So super grateful for this opportunity with that funding. Next. So for those of you who are not familiar with Teams, some of us live on Teams all day long, so this is second nature, but for some, Teams might not be that super familiar to you. There are some just little tips and tricks. Mike will, as he goes through his presentation tonight, will kind of power through that information. If you have questions, please feel free to type in the chat, and we'll get to as many of those questions either at the moment, but usually we will wait until the end of the evening and be able to have a nice discussion then. But you can raise your hand if you really need some clarification. We can call on you if there's something in the moment that you need clarified. And then we have some fabulous, Dawn and Sarah in the background are running all of our IT, so I want to do a little shout out to thanks to them for helping us along. So next, please. And so it is my great pleasure that I get to introduce Dr. Mike Bradley for this evening. I feel incredibly lucky that he was able to join us and be part of our series for May. So a little bit about Mike. It's been super fun to get to know him over the last couple of months as we've been chatting and planning. But Dr. Mike Bradley grew up in Philadelphia, whereas he says he barely survived his own adolescence. Like so many teens, his path to his passion found many detours. He was an officer in the U.S. Army, a disc jockey, and a law school student before fate landed him in a job working with teenagers, the job he never dreamed he'd love. That experience caused him to switch his studies to psychology, eventually earning his doctorate from Temple University. In the 30 years since, Dr. Bradley has worked with, in those 30 years, he has worked with all kinds of teens in all kinds of places, to include schools, prisons, and community programs. In addition to being a licensed clinical psychologist, Dr. Bradley holds specialized certifications in the treatment of substance abuse and trauma disorders. His publications include numerous articles and 5 books, which I absolutely love these titles. So the best-selling book, Yes, Your Teen is Crazy, Loving Your Kid Without Losing Your Mind, and Yes, Your Parents Are Crazy, A Teen Survival Guide.
I strive
And
to
then
be
he's
fair. Go ahead.
the heart and soul of the next generation. And then When Things Get Crazy with Your Teen, the why, the how, the what to do now. And then for our featured conversation for tonight, he's got Crazy Stressed, Saving Today's Overwhelmed Teens with Love, Laughter, and the Science of Resilience. So beyond all of that, Dr. Bradley maintains that his best credential in having parented 2 millennial teens into young adulthood and having lived to tell the tale. So now here to speak on Crazy Stressed, please join me in welcoming award-winning psychologist, Dr. Mike Bradley.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. I very much appreciate that intro. And while I'm thinking of it, just a shout out to everybody at St. Luke's that put this thing together. Those of you in the audience, if you haven't tried to do one of these things, don't, because they're so hard to pull together, even down to the very last second, as we found out tonight, trying to get the video going. But it is a real gem that these folks are putting it on. But this particular topic, because as you'll see in the first half of what we talk about, there's some serious issues going on with our teens. But as you heard in the intro that Tiffany did, one of my prior careers was as a officer in the United States Army, and I learned a lot there. I learned there's better ways for me anyway to make a living. But coming out of that and then becoming a psychologist, I've always stayed in touch with the military in various ways. And one of them was working with vets coming back with PTSD from the various situations we've been in over the past 20 years. And one of the specialties I developed was working with vets with PTSD of the type that most people think of with PTSD, people going through terrible firefights and explosions and so forth. And in fact, we did learn through our research that there's a whole nother type of PTSD. And bear with me on this, because this is where we get back to your adolescent kids. There's another kind of PTSD we found, which came from the fact that soldiers coming back from deployments who had been through terrible situations had terrible rates of anxiety, depression, and suicidal behavior, which you might expect. We also found that the soldiers coming back that never heard a shot fired in anger had the same amount of anxiety, depression, and suicidal behavior. And when we pulled that apart, we found out there's another type of PTSD, which has to do with just the day-to-day rigors of being in a high stress environment, extremely high stress. And soldiers on deployment, and it's Marines, Navy, Airmen, so forth, all are in a very difficult situations. It's like a day-to-day drip, drip, drip of stress. Even though something awful doesn't happen, they're constantly worried about something awful happening. Being in a hostile area apart from loved ones, apart from their support systems, all those sorts of stressors actually create a wound in the brain. It changes the brain architecture, which creates those terrible symptoms. I tell you this because as I did this for a while, I began to see a look in the eyes of the patients I work with. Some people call it the 1,000-yard stare, and I could sort of just see by looking at the eyes of my next patient that there's a good chance this guy's got PTSD. Folks, over the past 20 years, I've been increasingly seeing that look in the eyes of your children, that same 1,000-yard stare. And that same hypervigilance, kind of worrying all the time, not being able to report something awful happening, no explosions, no firefights, but just the day-to-day drip, drip, drip of extreme stress that our children now live in. And this is new. It's very different from your experience as teenagers, certainly mine. Um, but in doing this research and trying to help these folks with these symptoms in the military, we also discovered an amazing miracle. The hopeful part of the seminar, talking about something called resilience. And resilience turns out to be something that we find in both soldiers and adolescents who somehow not just survive these terrible times, but seem to thrive and become stronger and actually find happiness ultimately in their lives. But that different quality, that resilience or lack of resilience, has amazing impact. Let me explain with a story. Again, with vets I worked with, these are two young soldiers. They each lost a leg in the various wars. The first one, they called me in because he was refusing to get out of bed, said his life was over. He wouldn't see anybody. He refused to have any contacts with family or his fiancee. He was promising to kill himself at his first opportunity that he got. And that's how I think I would probably react if I'd gone through that. I did not. Um, and about 18 months later, I got another call. They said, Doc, Mike, we got another traumatic amputee here. I said, let me guess, he won't get out of bed. And they said, no, get this, we can't keep him in bed. He keeps doubling and tripling his physical therapy. We're afraid he's going to hurt himself. And he's not accepting a regular walking prosthetic leg. He wants the runner's prosthetic. So can you, kind of chill his jets a little bit down because he's doing too much. So I go in to see the guy, and he's annoyed I'm taking up his time, and he's chatting, and I pulled his chart, and this is a guy that not only was working on himself, he's working on everybody else. He would greet the new admits to the hospital. He would say, you got brothers and sisters here, introduce them. He was starting his own self-help groups for these kids. And I say kids because we forget that the military is largely teenagers, older teenagers, but teenagers nonetheless. So we have these two soldiers going through the same horrific stress and with two very different reactions, 180-degree different reactions. What is the difference? This thing called resilience, the thing that pops out in the research when we look at folks that survive and thrive through terrible challenges. And as you'll see, your children are going through terrible challenges. And if it sounds like a stretch to compare adolescents today to combat vets or just deployed vets, it's not extreme, folks, because the numbers of suffering are amazingly similar. The suffering of anxiety, depression, and suicidal behaviors when we compare them to teenagers with vets returning from deployments. So as parents, and again, I use a lot of military metaphor. Once you're in there, you can't escape it. But I talk about viewing parenting in the military framework of mission, strategies, and tactics. You start with a mission. What is this all about? What are we trying to do? And I would submit that our mission as parents in this day and age has to be to help build resilience in our kids, because things are not getting better in the world that our kids are experiencing. It is really getting worse in a lot of ways. So what is resilience? And pardon my coughing in addition to all the other issues we've dealt with today. I'm getting over a cold, but I am in better shape than my daughter says I appear. So I'll be swigging on water and clearing the throat. And I apologize for that. What is resilience? It's actually a set of skills and assets that people learn to use to cope with. I'm sorry, just getting a message. Okay, that people use to cope with stress, pain, and adversity. I'll tell you what it's not. It's not some weird magical ability to avoid or never feel stress, pain, and adversity. It ain't like the movies, the old John Wayne stuff, never sweat a drop under fire and all that nonsense. That's not the way people are built. When we get hurt, when we get scared, whether it's a veteran or a teenager, we feel crummy. We do feel all those symptoms of stress and pain and worry. But the kids with resilience are the ones that seem to be able to roll with these sorts of problems. Think about those two vets that I mentioned as two boats on the ocean, and they both get swamped by a huge wave, right? And they both go under. One goes all the way down to the bottom of the ocean. He's gone forever. Second one goes down. It takes the hit, but it bobs back to the surface. And amazingly, it bobs back stronger and smarter using those resilience skills and assets. You can think of resilience as being emotional buoyancy. Again, not to avoid bad things happening. That's not possible, but it's to be able to bounce back from bad things that are bound to happen in life. And they're happening more to teenagers these days. Uh, Weirdly, building resilience, guys, requires adversity. So if you followed the advice of psychologists like me 10, 20 years ago about, bubble wrapping your kids more or less, don't do that. To build adversity, you have to be in the game. You have to take hits and learn how to adapt and return to the game. Um, the great news about resilience is that it is not some genetically inherited trait, but it is a learned set of skills that can be fostered and taught by parents. Uh, when, how soon? Starting on the ride home from the delivery room, we start with building these skills and assets, as you'll see. And is it too late? I always hear that from parents. My God, I wish I knew this before. No, you can build resilience with someone in their 90s. They can learn to do these things and then be able to cope with adversity. So to convince you of my views on this stuff, I want to do it in four short parts. The first is we're going to chat a little bit about the brain inside your teenager's head and quit smirking. I can hear you smirking out there. Yes, there is a brain inside that kid's head. No, it's not the brain for which you had hoped. It turns out our adolescent kids are indeed brain damaged, but they're getting better. Their brains are fixing themselves. We'll talk about the specifics in a bit. But for now, know that their innate wiring in early adolescence in the brain is an anti-resilience factor. Second, we're going to talk about the world around our children. Guys, when your teenager says you don't know what it's like to be a teenager, trust them. You don't. I don't. I'm in the business. And like once every 2 weeks, I'm stunned to learn some other development of what's going on out there. So when your kid says you don't understand, agree with them. Say, you're right, I don't. Explain it to me, educate me, and then listen. And listen respectfully without judgment. Do not say, hey, I was a teenager once. You weren't. You may have been in Vietnam. You were not in Afghanistan. They're two completely different sorts of stressors, two different worlds. Then we'll get to the empowering part, talk about the 7 C's of resilience. These are 7 factors, folks, that we found in our research that emerged in the successful vets and teens that we studied. And we'll be going over what those factors are and give you some suggestions on how to include those in your parenting. And fourth, and my favorite part is Q&A, where I'll try to not talk too much, which I do all the time, and Q&A. Your questions, my answers. A couple of rules on Q&A. One, I am born Irish, not by choice, but by luck. In my family, Q&A stands for quarrels and arguments. So if you want to turn in a question that says Bradley's an idiot, where did he get his degree from, Sears? It's fine. Feel free. Be straight. I'll feel like I'm back at home at the dinner table. Second rule, there is such a thing as a dumb question. You know what the dumb question is? It's the one you don't ask, the one you don't get an answer to. That's dumb in every sense of the word. So you can write me at my website if you have a question, or there's great stuff online, by the way. Go to these parenting sites, there's fabulous ones. Maybe I didn't even clear this. St. Luke's maybe has some folks there that are involved in this, or some resources that can help you with your questions. Okay, so first anti-resilience factor in teenager is their own brains. Guys, what's happening with your teenager, the reason why they seem so crazy, it's where we came up with that word in all the books, is that they're going through a huge maturation process. And it's a process that proves to us that Mother Nature indeed has a vicious sense of humor, because she starts maturing the brain of a child to the brain of an adult over years, which is a miracle. It's amazing to watch. However, she starts in the back of the head and works forwards. What's in the back of the head? Powerful social, emotional needs for approval, needs for social dominance, aggressive needs, sexual needs. Um, it's all that stuff that builds up that really drives all of us as teenagers and as adults in the back of the head. And so those things kind of become supercharged as they hit adolescence. Uh, the problem is that the part that helps us not act out dangerous impulses from that part of the brain, that wiring is in the front and it gets wired in last. So when you're puzzled about your teenager's behavior, just view her as being this incredible sports car, this Ferrari monster car with 1,000 horsepower, all kinds of crazy capabilities and energy, and no brakes. So they get these impulses that they can't really rein in. And that's one of the first signs that those teen development years have begun. And by the way, when your kid does something really ridiculous, we always ask them the most amazingly stupid question, which is, what were you thinking? What will the honest teenager say? I don't know. Well, and they'll say, didn't you realize that yada yada could happen? No. And that's because the back of their head is on fire, saying, hey, let's sneak out of the house at 3 a.m. That'll be so cool. And the front of their head hasn't developed to say, wait a minute, that's probably a bad idea. So that's what you're dealing with for a few years. The next thing is they get a tad moody, in case you haven't noticed that. And girls and boys have differences in how the moodiness hits. Um, the boys tend to be angry or sullen, go to we call it to the cave for a number of years, usually 18 months. The girls, unfortunately, are a little more proactive, particularly with their mothers. They'll engage their mothers in these kind of trials and tribulations. By the way, moms, I know a lot of you are out there with tear tracks on your faces because you've had some horrible interaction with your teenage daughter. It's okay. It will get better. You got to take that on faith. Moms and daughters, most powerful relationship on the face of the planet. You're closer when they're younger, and you're closer when they're older, more so than other alignments in the family. But you pay dearly for it in adolescence. So we'll explain a little bit more about that when we get to some of the parenting techniques. Next, they're not sleeping. Teenagers in America are getting 2/3 of the sleep that they're supposed to be getting. Guys, just think about that one factor. If you cut your sleep by a third, and then did that for a couple of months, how would you be in 2 months? I think you would be like ADHD. I think you would be showing anxiety. I think you could be depressed. You might be so exhausted and unable to cope with things that you might not want to be alive anymore. Yeah, it's that one factor alone causes tremendous stress for teenagers. And that number gets worse and worse in terms of the amount of sleep they're getting. And the books talk about all sorts of tips to try to get them to sleep more. But we do find addressing that one factor makes a huge difference in teenagers' lives, getting them the amount of sleep they should be getting. Okay, second anti-resilience factor for teens is their world. Guys, their world is indeed crazy. I laugh, I joke about teenagers being crazy. It ain't nothing compared to the world around them. This is a world that comes at them in a myriad of ways, just like soldiers on deployments, that day to day drip, drip, drip of worry, anxiety, hypervigilance. The world just becomes a dark, threatening, scary place, even when something hideous doesn't happen. How? Well, I'll give you some of those factors for teenagers. Um, One huge stressor is excessive expectations. What do we mean by that? Well, the expectations, excuse me, have to do with things like sports. When I go to a high school, I used to play some sports in high school. I couldn't make the team in any of your schools. I wouldn't have a chance because the skill level required to play high school today is what used to be college in my day. They do an amazing amount of preparation. A lot of these kids are in training since they're 4 years old with different sports, but um, they cannot um, match the abilities. The typical kid can't compete with these kids that have been in training all their lives. Uh, and a lot of kids today are getting more negative than positive from their sports because they are so demanding and so driving. It's the kind of expectations we used to have of college students. The next one is, oh, the other expectations that are beating up on our kids, their bodies. They are just obsessed with how they're supposed to be looking physically. This is relatively new. Kids always worried about this stuff, but it now rises to a level of torture for the girls, but for the boys as well. Boys are now getting into bodybuilding in an amazing amount, taking all sorts of chemicals, a lot of which we worry about, trying to muscle up more than Mother Nature designed them to be. In the boys, we call it body armor, trying to settle some dis-ease inside of themselves about what they're going through and how they feel by putting on body armor, but it never works. They're trying to fix something inside by working on the outside. Another expectation is social. Every kid is supposed to be incredibly popular today. Um, they beat themselves up if they're not cool, they're not in the right group, they said something dumb uh, online because we'll talk about screens have magnified those things enormously. Before we talk about screens, the other expectation I wanted to mention is an unusual one. Kids today have an expectation, ironically, with as tough as their lives are, uh, that life is supposed to be stress free. I call that the Disney World phenomenon. That life is perfect, nobody's unhappy in Disney World, and those of us who have had some means to try to give our children a good life, we overdid it, and we kind of attacked anything that was causing them stress or making them unhappy, as opposed to letting them learn how to handle those stressors. And this has been another crippling influence. It's just as if they become allergic to stress. And as you may have noticed, life is stressful. And the next big change in the world is the screens. Guys, the screens have just magnified everything. In your day, wasn't there bullying? Sure. Social worries? Yes. Sexual pressures, drug issues? Yeah, absolutely. But in your day, how many kids' opinions of you did you care about? Four, five, maybe six if you were queen of the prom. Today, kids are trying to manage the opinions of sometimes hundreds of other kids because of the social media stuff. If you think about what you went through as stressful, well, you were dealing as a parent back then, uh, being a teenager, with muskets coming at you, Kids today are literally dealing with machine guns because of the pounding that the screens present to our kids 24/7, nonstop, telling them what's wrong with them, how they're not cool enough, they're not muscled enough, they're not thin enough, they're not anything enough. And it just creates that drip, drip, drip stress that changes their brains and creates these symptoms of anxiety, depression, and suicide. Some other things you should know about teenagers, things we've been measuring over 50 years that create stress and kill resilience. Ironically, kids today feel little control over the outcome of their lives. That just makes parents' eyes boggle, saying, wait a minute, my kid has everything in the world. I've given him a great life. I came from nothing. Well, I did too. I was born in Southwest Philadelphia. We were poor. I didn't know I was poor. I had a great time, but it was one pair of shoes. Nobody had a car. But when I deal with kids today, I don't think I would be alive, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic saying that. I don't think I would have survived their world. I'd much rather take the world I was dealing with. Ironically, as the kids who are entitled, who have a good life, middle class, upper middle class, they feel less control over the outcome of their lives. Um, and the other big group is the kids at the other end of the spectrum that are struggling down at the bottom in poverty level kinds of situations, also feel little control. And that is a function of the screens that pounds them with bad news. I remember hanging out with my gangster friends, as my father lovingly referred to them, back in Southwest Philadelphia. We used to go to the park um, as teenagers, and we would talk about what we could do in the world. One guy would say, "Yeah, I'm going to be a cop. I'm going to be a firefighter." Bradley said, "Yeah, I'm going to be an officer in the army and save the world." I didn't. I tried. It didn't work out. But we all had ideas about getting out of the hood. We just felt a sense of control. The world seemed simpler back then. Today, kids feel like they're just caught up in these currents and they're blown around and they really can't affect the outcome of their lives. That's a depressing view. Next, their goals are now much more materialistic and extrinsic. Back in the day, we used to ask kids with these silly questionnaires, what is this about? What's the point of existence? And they would say things like, doing something significant, doing something important, more so. Some kids were into the money and so forth, but a lot were saying, I want to be somebody kind of a thing. That has shifted. More and more kids today are all about the materialistic, the extrinsic, the money, the three-car garages, live well, live hard, and leave a good-looking corpse kind of stuff. He who dies with the most toys wins. Um, that's become cool and much more common. That's also a depressing view of life. Um, Next, they're less self-directed. Why is that? Because us wonderful parents, caring, and teachers and coaches, we overstructured their time. When we look at the kids who have advantages, middle class, upper middle class, they have a tremendous disadvantage, which is they have too many advantages. We run them from event to event. We run them from school to after school sports to coaching to enrichment activities to tutoring, on and on and on. Very little undirected time. Another problem we found is that we forgot that having nothing to do and being bored is tremendously therapeutic. That is an energy where kids, well, you remember your parents, right? If you said, I'm so bored, they'd say, yeah, I can help you with that one. No, 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 I'll find something to do. And then you would find something to do, make something to do. And guys, that time spent doing things you created as a teenager is much more valuable than any enrichment program I can think of. We've studied this. It's bizarre, but it's true. My son made me crazy when he was in high school, and he formed a rock and roll band that I could never do. And it made me nuts because he was really bright. He didn't really care about school, kind of mediocre. Um, and then when I thought about it, I realized, wow, look at all the energy and the learning that goes into running that quote stupid band. He had to do management, personality management, negotiations, try managing a group of one of the musicians, negotiating with clubs, budgeting, transportation, logistics. It was stunning how much he learned. And he uses that today in the things that he does as a young man with his own son, by the way. I can see that paying off much more than the Johns Hopkins summer science enrichment program I was trying to sell to him, and he was wise enough to say no way. Um, Next, they're much less self-reliant. And why is that? Again, as parents doing too much, we often don't allow decisions made by our kids that might end in failure. We think our job is to bubble wrap them. When Ross struggled in social studies, the teacher called us in because he had announced to us at a dinner one time. He said, I just want to let you guys know, me and my wife, I am not going to cooperate with social studies because I've studied this on my own. And I've found that social studies is actually a government mind control program constructed by rich white men like you, pointing to me, to control us. And I said, well, can I get this straight? You're saying you're not going to do the work in your social studies program? He said, yes. I said, do you understand? If you fail social studies, you'll be taken out of that gifted track. He said, yes, absolutely. I said, okay, just understand, we're going to hear a young man now, 13. We'll let you decide, but you handle the outcome of this. We will not be going in and fighting for you if you change your mind. He said, absolutely. Of course, end of the semester, teacher calls us in, and he was, it was 8:30 at night. He's exhausted. He's shifting in his chair. He's uneasy. We're in a really great school district. And he said, I just called you in because I had to talk about Ross's grade. And we said, okay, what is it? He said, well, if I did it by the numbers, it would be, and then he dropped his voice, an F. I said, an F? He said, yeah, if I did it by the numbers. And we looked at each other and we said, if he earned an F, he gets an F. Sounds good. He didn't have to call us in. And he looked at us. He said, you know, he'll lose the gifted track. And we said, yeah, we're not too wild about that anyway. But yeah, he put down his pencil, he slid back his chair, and he had the, 9 o'clock in the evening shadow on his face. And he said, I have to tell you, I've been teaching for 9 years. You're the first set of parents that I gave this message to that did not argue for a better grade for their child. We were stunned. Guys, a very important mantra in raising kids is good decisions made poorly are not as valuable as bad decisions made well. What's that mean? Short of something that's life-threatening, if you let a kid make the decision and they weigh it all out, and it doesn't work out for them, they will have learned an incredible amount. If you force the decision down their throat, you get them to do the thing that you know is a better decision, again, short of life-threatening, they will have learned that mom and dad are smart and need mom and dad to make their decisions from now on. So as much as you can, you want to hand the power for non-life-threatening decisions, not talking about sex, drugs, or violent stuff, to your kid. Let them make the mistakes while they're living in your house and they're not lethal. Uh, don't let them try to learn how to make decisions when they're 3,000 miles away at some college or in the military. You want to be sure that you've helped them learn how to think and make decisions. Next thing that's really changed that stuns people is our kids are withdrawing from life into screens. Um, and some of the statistics are bad news masquerading as good. What do I mean by that? One is kids report having less sex and there are fewer pregnancies in most areas. And that sounds like, oh, great, they're making better decisions. It's because sex has moved on to the screens. Not to get too graphic, but kids in relationships now have phone sex, cyber sex, not the real deal. Unfortunately, the real deal is where the real learning goes on, not on a screen. Next, they're having fewer car crashes. Everybody says, oh, that's great. No, it's because they're not driving. Kids are saying driving is too stressful, and they're okay with parent Uber. That is a personal stunner to me because me and my gangster friends all lived for that day we turned 16 and mad dash to the DMV to get our licenses. A lot of kids now are so anxiety prone that it just looks bad to them. They'd rather have mommy drive them. That worries us. Fewer are working jobs. Why? Because they like the parent visa. Um, and with all of these things, we also, in measuring how kids are feeling today, have discovered they are the loneliest generation we've ever measured. And this was before the pandemic. Folks, screens, cyber stuff cannot substitute for real life involvement in vivo stuff. There's some magical thing that occurs when people are together in person. A screen cannot reproduce, but screens have taken over largely how kids interact with each other. And that does worry us because it causes tremendous stress. We have a record number of kids that can't order a meal at a restaurant because it requires real life interacting with someone. Um, so those are just a few of the factors. There's many more, but those are the biggies. What is it doing to our kids? Fasten your seatbelts. We've had a 50-year rise in some frightening numbers of what's going down with our kids. First, the increase in drug use is staggering. People think that some drugs are being used less, they are, but other drugs more than compensate for that one that drops down. The fact is, marijuana, the one that we are now legalizing, and a lot of parents are saying, hey, that's so cool because marijuana is not a drug, right? Well, at the moment, I have more students, high school students, in rehabs for marijuana, fully addicted, going through a terrible withdrawal than all the other drugs combined. Guys, kids, teenagers simply can't use any neuroaddictive substance. Alcohol's in there, but alcohol poisons kids. They can feel the effects of it. The weed is so subtle, they don't understand how it impacts the brain. And um, the reason that they can't use is that their brains become addicted very easily in a short period of time. How do we know that? Well, the younger kids start to first use regularly, which means one time a week or more, will predict the risk of actual addiction. If you picture a group of 25 kids at age 21 who first start to use regularly any neuroaddictive substance, to include weed, it turns out that 1 out of 25 will become a full-blown addict to something, any drug. Not too bad. What if they start at age 18? Then the odds are 3 out of 25. If they start at 16, 6 out of 25 become full-blown addicts. And if they start doing something like weed once a week or more at age 14, 17 out of 25 become addicted to some substance. Bottom line is, our teenagers cannot use. This is one of the few red lines in the sand that parents must draw with their kids. And we've got epidemic levels of anxiety and depression. Over 50 years, those things have gone up about 500%. You heard that correctly. 500%. And last, and as dark as we'll get tonight, is suicide. Since 1952 to 2018, I'm sorry, to 2019, just before the pandemic, suicide in the general population had a significant increase, up about 100%, which is a lot. Teenagers, that same suicide number went up 500%. How could that be? Why? I just told you. You take a brain challenged creature, plunk her into a painfully stressed world without the resilience skills, non existing can start to look good. So everybody take a deep breath. What I want you to remember from that part, our kids are in trouble, guys. The Surgeon General of the United States has been screaming about this, but because there's so much bad going on in the world, he can't get any uh, TV time. But this is a pandemic within the pandemic. What's the good news? When we study kids who seem to be doing okay, we find resilience is the key. And the better news is you parents are the key to building resilience. So what I'd like to do is go to, hopefully you did get the handouts, or I think you'll be seeing them on screen now. If we could bring up the 7 C's of resilience. And these 7 C's that we're about to go over refer to 7 factors that we found over and over and over in all of the soldiers and all the teenagers that we researched who didn't collapse, who were able to handle these horrific stressors and actually come back, not only to survive what they went through, but to thrive, to become stronger in spite of it. If we can go to the first C, um, hold on a second. Let me get my screen so I can see what you, there we go. The first C is competence. What is competence? It's a group of specific skills and abilities where somebody can handle situations effectively. If you just think of all that stuff I went over about kids feeling lack of control in their lives and so forth, learning how to do stuff helps people feel more control. They feel like, wow, I can learn things. I'm smarter today than I was yesterday. Those things can be learning Chinese or AP history, can be learning how to hit a two-handed backhand. They can also be learning how to play, get bass guitar, or learning how to draw on a computer. It doesn't matter what they do. It matters that they do some things where they're able to develop these competencies. Can we go to the next C, which is something called confidence? And by the way, there's a whole bunch of suggestions there on things you can do to build those things and how to handle their involvement as they're acquiring those skills. If we could push through, because again, I'm talking too much and I do want to be sure we get through the agenda. Can we go to the next C, which is confidence? Confidence. What is confidence? It's really projecting competence into the future. When people acquire those competencies, they then start to think that, yeah, I can handle whatever is coming down the line. And that presents an attitude of being okay with challenges. A couple of key uh, points for parents with that is be sure you expect the best, not of achievements, but of personal qualities. When your kids make mistakes, try not to denigrate them, but rather use phrases like, hey, I know you're better than that. And if you had this to do over again, what would you do differently? So help them learn how to review their own behaviors and then plan to make changes in the future. Praise them often, but honestly about specific achievements. Do not snow them. Remember the whole stuff about, oh, you're the prettiest girl in the school, and oh, you're the best baseball player in the county. No, they're not. Don't tell them fake stuff. That causes them to distrust feedback. Find things that are real and then praise the heck out of those things that they do. Especially praise the efforts, not necessarily the outcomes. um, as much as you can, you want to be sure that they don't feel that you think they're stupid, rather that you see them as adults in training and that mistakes are fine. A mantra here is it's okay to make mistakes But it's not okay to do no thing. It's critical to do something and let them choose the things to do. And if we go to the next C, which is connections.
Hey, Dr. Mike, we had a question
Yes.
that is kind of relevant to the moment. From Perry, he said, isn't the phrase, "I know you're better than that," harmful? What's your...
Now, when somebody has done something, say they steal money, if you focus on them being a terrible person, you're getting into something called shame. There's a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is actually a therapeutic emotion. If we feel guilty about something, that's a signal to us that we are better than that. That's why we feel guilty. It's a dissonance within us. So to feel guilt is kind of saying, I know I'm better than that. I don't want to feel like that again. Shame is different. That's when we say, you're horrible. I can't believe you're a thief. You really disappoint me. You're a bad daughter. That creates shame. That's when people start to feel they are bad because of stuff they've done. So when you say to someone in a confrontation, Susan, I know you're better than this, having taken the money. What happened? How do we help you not do this the next time? So you're separating something that is a therapeutic response to a betrayal of some sort, saying, I know we're better than this, versus saying, this is something that's wrong with your character, and you always will be doing this sort of stuff. Any other question on that?
And Perry just had a response that said, I know my teen is destroyed by that, however.
Well, destroyed by being guilty for doing something bad can be good. These are the way kids learn who they are and help to build a moral character. Feeling bad is therapeutic if it's a guilt response. Feeling bad because you're shameful and you're a loser and a bad person, that destroys people and creates the next offense.
Thanks for the clarification.
Any other? Sure. The next C is connections. I'm so sorry about my voice running out. Give me a second. Connections. What are connections? We don't really know. We have a hard time defining them. They're kind of invisible lifelines between people. And it seems to be maybe the most critical aspect of being human is feeling connected to other humans. And in terms of evidence, think of that second soldier I told you about. The biggest difference between those two guys going through the same horrific stress and injury was that the second one was all about connections, all about helping himself by helping others, by building those relationships. That's magic. And conversely, the soldier that isolated spiraled down to the bottom of the ocean without those connections. So, as parents, what do you want to do? You want to remain connected, especially through the conflicts you're inevitably going to have. How do you do that? Number one, don't use fear. Guys, if you're going to use fear, anger, rage, yelling, you'll do nothing good and a lot bad. We write a lot about you must be what you want to see. You must show emotional control. Yelling and using punishments versus previously informed consequences become things that break the connections. Remind them as much as you can that you love them. Bookend your interactions with love. Sweetie, I love you. I love you too much to let you go to this beer party. Terrible things happen there. I'm sorry. I just can't be cool with that. I love you. So it reminds the two of you that the reason you're having the conflict is because you love them. The research interestingly shows kids who have too much conflict with parents do have problems with the connections. And ironically, kids that have too little conflict have the same kind of distance and lack of connection because they can feel the parent doesn't care enough to quote fight with them. It's all about finding that middle ground where you quietly and calmly tell them certain things are not okay and can't happen on your watch. Excuse me. Um, and move on to the next C, if we can. Character. Character has to do with what we do when no one is looking. And this is a tricky one, um, but the keys to helping kids build character is to help them first see how their behaviors can affect other people. Um, give them feedback like, you have no idea how happy you made grandma. Um, that their behaviors can actually have tremendous impact positively in other people. That being caring and compassionate is indeed a great force in fighting the evil in the world. Help them clarify their own values, especially when you disagree. Don't argue with them, not to become political, but to become political. Your kid often will go in the opposite direction of whatever your politics are. And they do that just to experiment with the world, trying to figure out who they are and where they are. Don't attack them. Just be so happy they're thinking and forming some values, because this is the beginning of them becoming a high character person. Um, help them develop a sense of purpose and passion in their lives. And that's where you say things like, what is this all about for you? What's the point of life? Throw these questions out. Don't argue their answers. Just try to get the wheels turning in their head. If they ask you what provides you purpose and passion, you share that with them. But just say, hey, that's just for me. You have to find your own. But it's real important to find that. Um, wherever you can, share your own experiences about things, about thinking of others' needs. Talk out loud. Become schizophrenic, that form of schizophrenia. Talk out loud. Let your kid overhear your mental process about, man, I could really use the golf course today, but mom's really exhausted. Just let the kid overhear this stuff. Folks, another secret of parenting is they will do much more about what they see you do than what you say they should do. They study us. When I saw that research, scared the hell out of me as a parent. And, oh my God, even when you think they're not checking things out, they are. They're listening around the corner. They're watching how you handle conflict with your spouse, how do you handle conflict with a jerk in the parking lot, all that sort of thing. They are drinking in. The research shows over and over and over. Again, as parents, we have much more impact, even today, on our children than any other force. Yes, you heard that correctly. Parental influence is much more profound, even than those screens that I hate slash love. Um, that stuff often disappears. They will do the opposite of your values, uh, try to go to the other extreme. They're just testing it out. But more and more, the research shows us ultimately kids come back to embrace the values of their parents when those values are lovingly demonstrated, exhibited, walk the walk, not talk the talk, not preaching, lecturing, pounding, but rather just living a certain way, letting your kids see it. Just Saturday morning saying, think I'm feeling sort of self-centered. I'm gonna take a run to the food bank. You want to join me? If the kid says, "Nah, it's stupid," say, "Okay," but I'm gonna head down there. I always feel better after I do that stuff. See you later. So softly done, softly modeled from parents. That stuff is incredibly powerful. Next, contribution. If we can punch that one up. What's contribution about? It's changing the world one pebble at a time. Um, you need to help the kids understand that the real world is not Disney World. And a lot of kids think it is Disney World, that it's supposed to be Disney World. And that makes me really sad. I had a girl on here this week that was collecting food, canned goods for the shelter, local shelter. And she was crying because kids were mocking her, making snide comments. Oh, look at that bleeding heart. What good is a can of beans going to do? And they were laughing, saying, it's not going to change anything. And they were standing around her, hurling insults for doing a good thing. And she was sad, saying, maybe they're right. The world's such a horrible place. What am I doing? I can't really change anything. And how do you respond to that? Say, well, those few cans of food made a big difference for somebody that didn't know how they're going to feed their kids that night. Yeah, but that's just one person, and there's so many homeless. Right. But there's one less homeless person. Tell them the concept of the candle in the darkness. What's the candle in the darkness? Well, picture a dark room. There's this tiny little light. What is your eye drawn to? The darkness or the tiny little light? Like, what the heck is that about? That tiny little light has tremendous power. And that girl, um, I think, came to see that what she was doing was so important to the bystanders, other kids who were watching that. That was very painful for her. But I know that other kids were watching and thinking about, yeah, maybe it is better to, light a candle versus curse the darkness. And if everybody took the time to do a little thing like that, could we start to really change the world? Yeah, for sure. Um, it turns out that when kids do make contributions to the world in whatever way they find, they begin to feel power and control over their lives. Remember, I was going over the statistics where they feel they have no control, that life is just, rolling dice and it doesn't matter what you do. It starts to help them feel like, well, yeah, I can't, fix the war in Ukraine, but, I could do a stint at the shelter and tutor some kids. I could do that. Maybe a kid will know his vowels at the end of my day there. That's a change. And that's something that can pay off later. So focus on contributions. If they refuse to do it, a lot of kids are just so cynical, as we discussed before, then pay them. I'm going to get hate mail from you psychologists out there saying, don't bribe your kids to do good things. Absolutely bribe your kids to do good things. Why? The trick is on them. I don't care why they start to do a good thing. If they do it for the $5, great. But the trick is on them, because if they go and do the good thing, they feel better. They may act like they just did it for the $5, but you do that a couple of times and the kid starts to get this sneaky addiction, a terrible addiction for doing good things. Their brain just starts to associate better feelings with having done something for other people, making a contribution somewhere. And the bribe falls off most of the time. And that doing behavior continues because it feels good for them. Next, coping skills. So, what are coping skills? These are martial arts for dealing with stress. A key one is to help kids to try to distinguish the stressors that they're dealing with and get them in their proper perspective. So when somebody is crushed and they want to die, because they didn't get invited to the killer party everybody else is going to, then a good strategy, first of all, is to support that because it feels like the end of the world to your daughter or your son. So you support, say, yeah, that sounds really painful. Get them to talk as much as they can about their pain. When they're done, give it a pause and then say, yeah, I can see that it feels like a real horror to you. Got a question. Do you think it is a horror or is it a frustration that you didn't get invited? If she says it's a horror, it's the end of my life, say, okay, um, well, have you thought about something horrible that's happened in the world recently? And she says, well, there was that shooting in Buffalo. That guy went up and decided to murder a lot of black people. Yeah, okay, sweetie, there's a horror for sure. That's worth feeling like you want to die, perhaps. Not going to a party. I got to ask you again, sweetheart, is that a horror or is that a frustration? Oh, I guess it's a frustration. You're helping her to go to the smarter part of her brain to get perspective, to understand that uh, there are differences between horrors and frustrations. And you don't want to let frustrations certainly end your life or steer your life. To help kids to make that distinction and say, sorry, there's just a lot of frustrations in everybody's life. But the key is, what do we do about them? How do we make changes we want to do? Model positive coping strategies by narrating your own responses. Yeah, this feels scary right now, but I know the sun will come up. Um, I can't let fear make my decisions. Earlier tonight, when the tech wasn't working, and 15 minutes before airtime, I throw everything in the car and go running out of the house because I drove to my office hoping we could get the video part working there. My child brain was freaking out. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. These poor people are going to be so disappointed. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then I said, wait a minute, that's a frustration. Like, this ain't all those dead people in Buffalo. And it calms me. It helps me make the distinction and then get about solving the problem as best as I can. Serenity prayer, everybody should have that up on a wall somewhere. If you don't know it, get it. You don't have to be religious. It's the smartest psychology I ever heard. It goes, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that's 400 or 500 years old. Somebody can correct me on that. But I think it's a way old prayer. And man, it is the smartest psychology in the world. Help your child use that, have it up on a wall and say, sweetie, is this something you can control? Can you control Susan's approval of you? Do you have that power? No. Well, do you have power to do other things? Oh, do you have power to go do that tutoring that you seem to love, or working with your junior little sister thing? You're always like, so excited afterwards. Yeah, I guess so. Well, maybe you should think about casting your gaze in that direction, the things you can control. Next, model the importance of wellness, exercise, diet, and sleep. Those are the three legs of the stool that makes all the difference in our lives. But don't beat your kids into doing this stuff. It works much better if you model it. And again, do that, out loud talking where, I feel so much better when I get that sleep, and show them your energy level and show them your positivity level when you are doing those things. And then finally, the last C is control. I think if you can bet, there we go. What is control? Well, that's learning that most of the things in the world do happen as a direct result of somebody's actions and choices. This is pushing back against the kids feeling that they have no control, and their pessimism about the world because they hear all the bad news. Do point out that largely those are bad decisions made by people, And then unfortunately, we don't have a good news cable station that has 24/7 good things. Great stuff happened today in Philadelphia. This girl collected cans and took them down to the shelter. It doesn't sell. We love the blood and the gore and who hates who and who's an idiot and who's not an idiot. And it is beating up our kids. Again, that's one screen, the TV. All the other screens do this stuff even much more profoundly. Guys, always try to point out their successes, even if little things. If a kid loses his mind and he empties the dishwasher, be on them like white on rice. Like, oh my God, that you have no idea how you made my day today, son. When I came in from work and I was all tired and down and, can't stand listening to the news and the dishwasher was empty. You put a smile on my face. Thank you. There's a bunch of, C's you're addressing with those kinds of behaviors with your kid. Understand that your kids are always hearing about how they're terrible. They start out their day usually late getting to school. They hear from teachers how they're not any good at social studies. They hear from the coach they can't hit a curveball. They hear from their social group that they're losers, get laughed at. It just the criticism in a teenager's world today, again because of the screens, is just stunning. It, I thought I had a rough adolescence. That's not a joke when I said I barely survived. We'll do another seminar on Dr. Bradley's misadventures. I am serious. I could not have survived their world. And I keep beating you with that because I'd like you to feel some empathy for them, for their situation as being so different than yours. And that leads us to the issue of consequences versus punishments and into the 10 commandments. If we could get to that slide. And I know I'm running late. I always am. Sorry. But I want to get this one commandment in. If we could get to number one, thou shalt be as a dispassionate cop unto thy child. If you want to do one resilience uh, increasing commandment, this is the one. What's a dispassionate cop? Well, think about that cop that pulled you over the other day. You were late to work and you blew the stop sign, and that cop had a really bad day. And he's got hand on his gun and he's yelling at you and insulting and says, oh, you guess you're late to work, right? Well, you're going to be a lot more late now. Walks away, sits in his car. You could see him sipping coffee and playing on his cell phone. And you're getting later and later and madder and madder. And he comes to your car and he says, oh, your gas pedal gets stuck, did it, lady? Oh, sorry, that's Toyota's. Tosses the ticket in the window and walks away. Who are you mad at? The cop. You're in a rage. You come home. What do you tell your partner about? This crazy cop. Can't believe it. The way he treated me. You don't tell your partner about the stop sign. You tell him about the cop. Another cop the next day pulls you over, and her delivery is a little different. She says, sorry, man, but you went through that stop sign. I'll get you out of here as soon as I can. I know you're a teacher at the school by your bumper sticker, but it is better to be there late than not at all. Comes back, gives you the same ticket as the angry cop. The delivery's a little different. She says, just to let you know, about every 6 months, we're picking up body parts at this intersection. It's really dangerous. Please slow down. I don't want to be picking up your body parts. I hope the rest of your day is better than this. Gives you the same ticket, same point, same fine. As she walks away, who are you mad at? Yourself. This is the difference between punishments and consequences. So in parenting teenagers, punishments don't work. The first cop used punishment. It wasn't the ticket, it was his attitude, his snarkiness, his insulting demeanor. He was making stuff up as an outcome of your going through the stop sign. He didn't just give you the ticket. The second cop was giving you a ticket that you knew you would get if you got caught going through a stop sign. So always set up your rules with your kids with consequences, not punishments. When they screw something up, don't rock and roll in and take their cell phone, take their guitar, whatever. Actually, on almost every first offense, they get a pass. So if she drinks beer in the park, you don't say you're grounded till you're 37 and a half years old and give me your cell phone, because she didn't know in advance what the fine would be. It makes a big difference. So when you talk to her, the first thing is to talk about whether it's okay for kids to drink beer or not. Say that her punishment, if you want to call it that, is research the effects of alcohol on teen brains. You'll do research and you sit down and you talk about it later. You exchange views. When she says, well, am I grounded? Say, no. And then she says, great. As she bounces out, say, but we got to talk about if it happens again. If it happens again, can we agree that you're showing the both of us you're not ready for the freedom of hanging out in the park, that makes you make bad decisions? You're a good kid. You'll figure it out. But if it happens again, we'll be retiring, going out to the park, or the sleepovers where this always happens, at other people's houses. She says, what? I can't see my friends? Say, no, I want you to see your friends. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to keep you alive. So invite your friends over here when you want to sleep over. I'll provide the goodies and the movies, whatever you want. And she says, well, the kids won't come to our house. Gee, why is that, sweetheart? Usually it's because you don't tolerate the drug use. So you're always being calm, dispassionate, saying, I do this stuff because I love you. And you link the consequence to the behavior. Sweetie, I love you too much for you to be in a park making those kind of bad decisions that could hurt you terribly. Sorry, but after 3 months, we'll roll it back. We'll let you try sleepovers away again because you're smart. You'll get it. You're a good kid. You'll figure it out. So always pivot to the light at the end of the tunnel with the consequences when they have to be enforced. And the rest you can read on your own time because I got to shut up to get to some more of your quarrels and arguments. So have I put the team to sleep? Are you guys still there? Can you get some more questions going?
Oh, you're doing great, Mike.
Oh.
Do you want to go into our Q&A here? I was going to say that I don't know that many people that can do this engaging of a conversation without their camera on. So super grateful for your guiding us along this journey. I don't see any questions in the chat. Are you ready
you
for
guys?
Q&A?
I'm sorry?
Are you ready for some open conversation?
Absolutely. How about questions and arguments from you guys?
Absolutely. So you are welcome to ask questions. You can type them. You can raise your hand. You can turn your camera on if you would like. It'd be great to see some faces as to who our conversations or who our participants are. Dee Dee in the chat put, I love the 10 commandments. She actually just sent me a text a little bit ago. She's our local juvenile probation, saying that she can't wait to share with her parents.
Okay. Yeah, do copy them and hand them out. You all have my permission. Get them out there as much as you can, please.
And Dawn and Sarah, maybe we could take the slideshow down and so we can see more faces. So we've got a comment from Shannon Nelson says, howdy, could you, welcome to Idaho. Could you talk about self-harm a little bit more?
Oh, okay. Yeah, self-harm or self-injury, also known as cutting, which is the way it typically manifests. People see it as suicide. It is not typically suicide. It's, as a girl once said to me, I'm not cutting because I want to die. I cut so I don't die. When people are cut, their brain changes chemistry in a way that can temporarily fight anxiety and depression. So a lot of kids discover this and they do the cutting as a way, excuse me, I got to get another cough drop in here. They do the cutting as a way to fight off terrible urges to maybe, in fact, suicide. So if you can, Don't judge that. Try not to be horrified by it, but rather say to the kid that, this is a symptom, not a sin. Again, be the dispassionate cop. Say, I can see you're really hurting. I'm so sorry you weren't able to tell me about that before. Offer her a hug. Girls do it typically, but boys are getting into it now. And say, we're going to get you the help you need so you don't feel this crumbing. So it is indeed a symptom. And if you can, as horrified as you are, it's also your blessing. It's your good luck because you were able to discover that she is suffering that much before it gets to a point of suicide. And then get her to a mental health professional ASAP. And also have the cuts evaluated by a physician because they can turn nasty, they can become infected. And a lot of the cuts, hopefully not in your case, but a lot of the cuts can be in places you can't see. She may show you what's on her arms. You don't know what's on her thighs or other places. So do get her to the pediatrician. You get out of the room, let the pediatrician handle it from there. They're seeing a lot of it, so they know what to do.
Great. Thanks for that, Mike. So we've got another question. How do you approach screen time with teenagers and boundaries?
I was hoping I'd get out of this without somebody asking me that question. Yeah. Uh, Again, there's stuff online about how to do this. The weird thing is that um, your job is to help your kid learn to live with screens, not to take the screens away. So while they're under your roof, they don't learn that. So they have to engage with the screens to develop what we call self-regulation so that they know when they've had too much screen time. Because again, 3,000 miles away, you ain't going to be there to help them regulate. And a lot of kids coming from over controlling parents who do just grab the screens and shut them down. When that kid gets out to college, they can be, I've had a number of them that are up for days, literally, on the screens and then have these complete meltdowns, coming home crashed and burnt from college after investing $30,000 in the failure. So you want your kid wrestling with this while they're home. How do you do that? You start with the least intrusive option. And that's where you start a discussion saying, how many hours do you think you put in on a screen? She'll say 2, it's 12. So say, well, tell you what, let's do a little experiment because they have the devices now. We'll tell you how much time they've been used. So let's take a look at your device, and we'll have a meeting in a week. See how many hours you put in. So then you have the meeting. Usually at a coffee shop, by the way, it works great. I love the coffee shop, not the kitchen. It's neutral turf. Say, well, how did you do? And her eyes boggle. Oh my God, I was on 12 hours a day. And you say, right, do you think that's excessive? Yeah, it's a lot. So what should we do, dear? Oh, I'll get it. I'm going to shoot for 4 hours a day this week. Cool. What if you don't hit that target? I don't know. And then you say, well, maybe we should talk about some timers or something like that to help you learn to sign off the screen. Okay. Of course, she's going to blow through that commitment, but now you've put it in the process that maybe she needs timers to help her get off the screen, which a lot of kids and adults need these days. But you always sweeten the pot with an incentive, saying, tell you what, since you're dropping 5 hours a day on the screen, how about if I pay you $1 an hour for each hour you do less on the screen? So she feels like she's earning something. Again, you can call it a bribe, but it helps her get over that hump of trying to withdraw from the screen addiction, and then experiencing the fact that she feels better, and kids do feel better when they have less screen time. I've had kids that have shut their own systems down, which is a wonderful thing to see happening. I've had a number of kids that have killed their social media. One girl said, I'm killing it before it kills me. And she said, I feel so much better getting rid of those stupid apps. But her parent wisely didn't go to war. The parent started the discussion about this, trying to get the kid to think about it, and helped her slowly move in that direction. So look at those kind of strategies. So your kid has to learn to live with the tech. Sorry, it's here. It's going to remain here. We all have to learn how to just have 1 or 2 cups of coffee and not go for 3 or 10. We all have to learn that trick. So is your kid. And if I could do the wrap up, are we ready for that? Or did you have another question?
We've got just one more question and then we can
Okay.
wrap up. So,
Okay.
so from Jean, is there one commandment you think is most important for overwhelmed parents to lean into most?
Well, yeah, and that actually sets a segue to the wrap up. You want me to roll with that, or?
Sure, that's perfect.
I'm sure that's not my wife that sent that one in. She's okay. No, the most important one is the last one. Ironically, that's how I always wrap, which is this too shall pass. Guys, don't get bogged down in the moment thinking this is forever. When you're going through a rough time with a teenager, and we've talked a lot about empathy for the teens, have a little empathy for yourself. This is really, really hard in case you haven't noticed, because it is a whole new world, as you've heard. And the challenges are not what your parents faced at all. This is a much more stringent kind of situation. It requires higher levels of discipline. So I don't want you to look at all these things, the 7 C's and the 10 commandments, and say, I can't do this. Bradley's out of his mind. I get too emotional. Guys, it's okay. Just take a breath. These are all goals we aspire to. Parenting is a batting average. If you're batting, 700, you're doing great. We all have failures. And I actually believe that's part of the plan, fate or God or whatever you ascribe to. I think we're built to be fallible as parents. And I think it's okay, um, because that gives us an opportunity to teach our kids really valuable stuff. Have you ever tried lecturing to your teen about things like owning their behaviors, wrestling with imperfection, striving to do better? You know what they hear after word 3? Wah, wah, wah. But when you screw up, when you blow up and break all the rules that Bradley's laying out here, and you freak out and yell at your kid and call it bad names, there's your blessing. What do? You go knock on her door like I've done on my kids' doors many times. Yeah. Can I come in? Yeah. Sweetheart, what just happened? That was not you. That was me. I am so sorry. I intend to work on that. I hope you can forgive me. And you turn around and walk out. Your behavior. Her eyes will be wide open. Her deflector shields can't come on because you're not talking about her. You're talking about you. And what is it you're teaching? Wrestling with imperfection, striving to do better, owning your behavior. All there, just talking about you. So your failures are actually helpful. Point one. Point two, teenagers can't help but do okay. Their brains, every day you get through where everybody's still alive, their brain gets smarter, better able to self-regulate, better able to think. Um, so you view this as short time in the military. We would put up calendars and cross off each day where we were going to get out of this terrible place, and just keep saying, this will pass, we'll get out of here, and everybody stay cool, and we're going home. It's the same with parenting teenagers through rough times. It is temporary. In spite of everything I just went over with you, most kids do fine in this world. A tragically large number do not, more than we've ever seen before. Kids do go down in terrible ways, but most kids are still doing okay. That stuns me. That's why we're having this seminar, because we started to turn it around to say, how do the successful kids get through this? And that's how we got to the 7 C's of resilience. Stop seeing crises as failures. When your kid comes home after drinking in the park, you thank God or fate or whatever, say ding, 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 just time to go to work, like to the guys at the firehouse. That's, you're paid the big money as a parent to deal with those things because now you can teach. Doing the drug and alcohol lectures when they're little kids, it sounds nice. It doesn't work. When a kid comes home with beer on her breath, now it's relevant. That window is open. It's for real. Now you can get some real teaching done about researching the true effects of alcohol or weed or whatever. Next, focus on the heart. Guys, I know we're all about, the grades and the sports and all that sort of stuff. That's not important. It's all about focusing on things like character, values. Once you get that stuff in place, achievement follows. I've lived it in addition to preaching it. I've seen it with my own kids. Once they have the heart stuff in place, you can't stop them from achieving. They want to do stuff in the world and they buckle down. What about the kid that's doing mediocre grades in high school? Well, God has safety nets for that. It's called uh, community college. Lots of kids boot high school, hit themselves in the head senior year, go to community, learn how to study, and they can go anywhere they want after that. I had a kid go to NYU out of community college and wrote me a snarky letter. Her name was Becky. Said, "Hey, Dr. Bradley, this is Becky. Remember me? I'm the kid you couldn't get to do her homework. Ha ha ha. Guess from where I just graduated? NYU." I was stunned. After I heard about Becky, she had gone to community. So, but she was a great kid. She was the kid doing the food drives and the shelter work and all that stuff. Heart first, achievement follows. A lot of parents try to do it the other way around, and hammering them on achievement when they're not ready can destroy the heart, can destroy your connection with the kid. Um, we have no way of fixing lost connections. We do have ways of fixing mediocre grades. Guys, you know what your real ultimate mission is? It's not to raise an Ivy League freshman. That's not what this is really about. What resilience is about is to raise the parent of your grandchildren, to raise the parent of your grandchildren. Guys, this is as close as we get to touching the face of infinity. What do you want to hand down? What do you want your child to be doing with their child when their child is making them crazy because your grandchild is now a teenager? What do you want to see happening? Do you want to see anger, yelling, criticism, rejection, coldness, loneliness? Is that what you want your heirloom to be? Or would you rather be seeing things like compassion, acceptance, support, and love, especially in the face of provocation from a crazy teenager? This is really super important to remember what your real job is. It is raising the parent of your grandchild. I'll tell you my two best tricks. The first one I call the deathbed exercise. I don't know why, Tiffany. I can't get it published. The publishers keep saying it's a terrible title, rewrite that. But I don't know what else to call it. I'm open to suggestions. What's the deathbed exercise? When I would come home after being on the road doing these trips, speaking trips, and my wife would, we'd be passing ships in the night, and I knew I'd come home to find the kids had demolished the house. And being ex-military, and I like things in order, and being Irish Catholic, I can get on a rage like nobody else, and I can feel my blood pressure going up. 10 o'clock at night, I'm exhausted, plane's late, all that. And I'm getting ready to go King Kong on my daughter because I know it's going to be a mess. I stop in the garage and say, "Yo, Mike, how will I feel? How will you feel then on your deathbed, reviewing your life about what you're about to do now?" Ding, thank you. Point to the heavens. Got it. Thanks. And I go in, "Sarah, give me a hug, girl. I missed you. God, it's so good to see you." As I'm struggling through the sea of Chinese food boxes and the lo mein on the floor, I'm hugging her, saying, "Just want you to know I missed you and I'm so proud of you. I know you played really hard and you were hurt. And I know you lost. And then mom told me you feel really crummy, but I'm so proud you played that game hurt and you didn't quit. I am so impressed with that, sweetie. Give me a hug. And by the way, could you help me with these 10,000 Chinese food boxes on the floor? It helps us remember what's important. Go to your deathbed, sorry, and then say, how will I feel then about what I'm about to do with my kid tonight? Final trick, and I'll let you go after that. Keep laughing. You got to laugh, guys. You got to see these things are ridiculously funny at times. I know it doesn't seem that way, but when Sarah had, but the answer is still no, love you. And she went berserko up the steps and screaming and demoed her room. It was funny. You have to look for the humor in these bizarre things. It helps. It's the final defense for soldiers in foxholes, cops in the middle of the night in a bad neighborhood, and for parents of teenagers in the difficult years. Find the humor. Cindy, my wife, and I have a cartoon on our wall. It's got a middle-aged couple on opposing couches, and the guy lifts his head. They're both reading books. And he says, well, dear, now that our children are all in jail, maybe we can take the trip we always planned. And that silly cartoon got us through so many dark nights. So remember to keep laughing. And thank you so much for putting in the time and putting up with my horrible voice. Could have been worse. You could have had to look at me. That would have been a real crummy night. So, but I really appreciate your sticking through this. And thank you so much to the team at St. Luke's, guys. This stuff is really important to get out there in these days. Thank you.